This afternoon, I want to talk to you about how I really screwed up last week. I had a pretty nasty cloth pad mishap and how I went about fixing it. One of the things I've been asked a lot is how do you sanitize pads, and when do you need to sanitize pads, and how long can you let your pads sit without cleaning them? So I'm going to talk to you about that because I actually had something like that happen to me. And in the process of fixing my cloth pad mishap, I ended up with the idea to pit the Vanish brand soap and Oxy powder, which are a UK product. It's largely available in the EU, and I think Australia and New Zealand have it as well. And then I pitted that against, I did a side-by-side comparison of these products and the OxyClean and Fels-Naptha bar, which are US only product. And Great Britain kicked America's butt in this particular competition. So let me tell you how it all came about and how it went. One of the questions that I've had from beginners and from people who've been using cloth pads for a long time, when we start talking about laundering cloth pads and what are the best ways to go about doing that, one of the things people ask me is, well, how long can you let them sit? I mean, how often should you wash them in order to be, hygienic and keep everything, sanitary? And what I had always said in the past is, up to a week is fine, but, you don't want to go, if your cycle's longer than a week. And some people do have a menstrual period that lasts longer than 7 days. Lots of conditions out there, and some people who are just predisposed to long periods. And my recommendation has always been never to let them stay in a dry stored wet bag for more than a week without laundering them. And so I've had people ask me, well, what do you do if they sit longer than that? And of course, me being me, I was just like, well, I just can't envision a scenario in which that would happen. Well, it happened to me. I have been very, very kind of ditzy and forgetful since I had my surgery. Things are different. My schedule and my routines have all been disrupted by the post-surgical pain and all of the doctor's appointments and all the things that I can't do that I used to do. So when my schedule, my routines get disrupted, I forget things. And I forgot my wet bag full of pads. So all 16 of these glorious pads were left soiled in a dry store wet bag for 21 to 25 days, something in that neighborhood. I was horrified. I was like, okay, I'm never going to be able to use these again. And so I started to face down the possibility that I was going to have to toss my very favorite, because all my favorite ones are in here. My Eeyore pad was in here. So I had 16 in total. And so I started talking to the people on the Facebook group. What do I do? How do I fix this? Are they ruined forever? What am I going to do? So I'm going to tell you what I did. And of course, as we started talking about products, I got the brilliant idea to take some UK products that were sent to me by some lovely members of the group. And I'm very appreciative. We did this in our cleaner swap. And these are both Vanish brand, the Vanish laundry bar and the Vanish Oxy powder. And I thought, well, why don't I do what, because I had too many for one sink, too many pads for one sink. So I thought, okay, I'll put half of them in a sink with this, and I'll put half of them in a sink with my OxyClean and my Fels-Naptha soap, which is what I normally use. They're US only products. And we'll see which one comes out better. So let me talk to you about how I fixed and sanitized the pads that had sat around too long, and talk about the many glorious benefits of Vanish. So I had 16 pads in that wet bag. And by the way, all of them are gloriously stain-free and sanitized now. I saved every single one. There's not a mark, blemish, or shadow on any of these pads now. So it really came out so much better than I could have expected, and they have been thoroughly sanitized. So how did I do that? The way that I ended up comparing the two sets of products is I have two twin pads here, other than the color difference. They are 11-inch cotton top moderate pads with a bamboo flannel inside and WinPro on the back. These are both novel red pads. And I was devastated because these two actually were kind of the worst. They were the most stained, and I was the most worried about retrieving these two pads because I really didn't think I was going to be able to get them back. Obviously, after a pad sits soiled that long, not to be indelicate, but they were very dry and discolored, and something had to be done. So after consulting with some other people before I got started on this, the first thing I did was I took this entire pile of pads, including these two guys, and they all went into one big sink together full of cold OxyClean, the American powder sink, and they just soaked for an hour, because the idea is that they were all very dry and I needed to loosen them up and get them soaked so that they could be properly rinsed out. So the first thing you want to do if you have pads that you need to sanitize is you need to make sure that you get everything out of them. So that was the first step. After an hour, they were all good and soaked, and there had been some of the oxy, just mean an OxyClean or oxy powder, oxygen cleaner. It just means hydrogen peroxide. It has a dry form of hydrogen peroxide in it. So what I did then was I took it and I just rolled them all up and squeezed them and rinsed them until the water ran clear. Now, all that did was rinse them out, okay? We still needed to deal with stains, and we still needed to make sure they were sanitized. So both of these pads were by far the worst stained out of the entire group. And so I guess I'll go first with sanitizing, what you need to do, and then we'll talk about the stain cleaner fight. Assuming that the pads you need to sanitize are your own, you don't need to worry about illnesses. You don't have to do a Hep C protocol on your pads unless you have Hep C. So you don't really need to worry about that sort of thing. What you're mostly concerned with is the buildup of mold, fungus, or mildew on pads that have sat long enough to develop those kinds of microbial infestations, as it were. And mine definitely had, and it is humid here. And even though they didn't smell like mildew, I don't know, and I didn't get a microscope down on them. So let's just assume that there's probably going to be some mold or mildew or something fungusy or bacterial that you don't want in your pads when they've sat that long soiled with bodily fluid. And so what I did was I looked it up, and hydrogen peroxide is actually a very, very good disinfectant, and it is effective against all of the most common microbe type and microscopic problems that you might worry about living inside your pad. So any microorganism you're trying to get rid of, hydrogen peroxide is a good bet. And so what I did was, after I had effectively stain treated and completely rinsed them all out and they looked nice again, then what I did was I sprayed them all with 3% hydrogen peroxide and then laundered them with my regular clothing. And that's really all you need to do to make sure that they are safe and clean for your use again. If you are sanitizing pads that came to you used previously by someone else, that is something that I leave up to your own discretion. But if it were me, I would feel it necessary to follow a Hep C protocol, because there's a lot of people out there who are undiagnosed, and people on the internet are crazy. So I would just, have an overabundance of caution if I were doing that. And so I would run them through the hot bleach and I would look that up and make sure that you know what those are. That's not what we're talking about with these. These were my pads. I knew that they hadn't been exposed to any illness, any of those kinds of pathogens. I was more concerned about making sure that I wasn't signing up for some kind of a urinary tract infection using something that had other kinds of bacteria or molds or funguses that could cause a problem for me. Got me? Okay. So the hydrogen peroxide spray at the end was the deal. Now the fun part was the stain treating, because I had to make a game out of it so I didn't cry. So in editing this video, I've gone through, and of course I've tended to venture off into things that border on medical advice, and I wanted to just do a quick reminder that I'm not a doctor. I have no professional skills in that area at all. These are things that I've read on the CDC and NHS websites because I was investigating for my own, edification a while back. What do you do if you want to sanitize something? And what would be the worst, hardest pathogen to get out of linens? And how do you get rid of it? Just because people ask me these questions all the time, and because I wanted to know the answers. But the truth is, you've got to remember that the CDC says that transmission of any disease through linens is negligible. It's something that you don't need to worry about. And so the advice that I'm giving, the things that I'm printing in all of my messages here in this video and that I'm talking about, these are, you know, worst case scenarios. These are the things that I would do because I know that once I have done those things, then I don't have to worry about anything, small or large, being problematic in my linens. So this video is not supposed to be scary. You're not supposed to assume that if you trade pads with somebody, there's going to be some horrible virus that's going to kill you in them, because there's probably not. But if you want to be super careful and you want to know the answer to the question, how do you kill everything in a pad? That's the information I'm trying to give you for the sanitization processes, okay? So please don't misunderstand me. You don't have to do all of these things. But so many people ask me, how do you get rid of the worst stuff that can be in pads? So that's why I tried to compile this information, and I hope you find it helpful. So now let's just talk about the fun stuff, which was US and UK competing stain treaters, because that was the fun part for me. So I got the idea to compare the two, and it was really because I had the two underneath my counter. I have the Vanish products underneath my counter right next to where I keep my OxyClean and my Fels-Naptha bar. And the OxyClean Fels-Naptha combo is what I use every month. But I was trying to make a game out of it, and I did have quite a few pads, and I wanted them to have lots of room to move around in the water because they were so heavily stained. So I divided them up equally into piles of 8. 8 pads, including this one, went into the sink with the Vanish products, and the other 8 pads, including this one, and these were going to be my litmus for comparing the two because they were both about equally stained and they're both identical pads. So this one went in with the OxiClean. And so after about, oh gosh, I think it was 4 hours, I went and I checked the Vanish sink, and this one was almost completely stain-free already. And I checked the Oxy sink, and this one was still pretty badly stained at that point, to the point that I wasn't willing to share photos of it on the internet with the people in the group who were with me that day. They were my cheerleaders, giving me suggestions and such, and making jokes and having a good time about it. So basically what happened was I let them all sit for about 6 hours, and after 6 hours, every single pad in the Vanish sink was completely stain-free. And so at that point, I took those out, squeezed out the excess water, sprayed them with hydrogen peroxide, and put them in a load of laundry. The Oxy pad, 4 of them were completely stain-free, and then there were 4 that still had shadow stains. They were greatly reduced. The OxyClean and Fels-Naptha combo is very, very effective. I'm sure that if I had let them sit overnight, they would have been stain-free as well, but I'm sorry, 6 hours versus overnight, Vanish wins. So what I did was I took those 4 and I put them in the Vanish sink. And within 30 minutes, they were all completely stain-free. And so then I squirted those with hydrogen peroxide and put them in the next load of laundry. And so the story has a happy ending. All of the pads are completely sanitized and completely stain-free now, and saved by the Vanish. And then the other thing is that I finally was able to do a really good quality comparison between the Vanish brand and the brands that I've been using, because I have quite a few people who watch this channel and who come to the Facebook group who do not have access to Fels-Naptha or the OxyClean brand. And so now, not only do you have products as good as what I'm always harping on about, they're readily available in your own local department stores. So happy vanishing, happy washing, and don't let your pads sit in your wet bag for that long, because it took me all day long to deal with that mess. Oh my mercy. Won't happen again. All right. Love y'all. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.